This episode is sponsored in part by PTZOptics. Why hire a camera operator when the control is in your hands? Visit PTZOptics.com for more information. And by NewTek, makers of the TriCaster TC1. Stun your viewers, not your accountant. Visit newtek.com for more information.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Salt Talk, Sound and Light Technology Talk. I'm Julia Sherwin with PTZOptics. Happy 2/22/22. That's a mouthful. It is, in numerology circles, this is a very lucky day. So we're very grateful that you are here with us. We're going to recap a little bit about the recent Worship Summit Live that we hosted a few weeks ago and talk about some of those questions that came up, some of those audio-specific questions when it comes to bringing in your audio and your worship live streams. And thanks everyone for saying hi. Good morning from snowy northern Wisconsin. Good morning, Dave. Good morning, Tim. And my co-host is with me, Stephen Haywood. How are you today, Stephen?
I'm doing good, Julia. It's a very nice day outside. We see the grass finally after many, many weeks.
I know you have a lot of snow in your area. Speaking of snowy Wisconsin, you're in eastern Ohio, and we have not had that level of snow here in southeastern Pennsylvania.
We've been getting a very good dose of it. So, I mean, all that's left is like the piles where the plows would plow up or you did your driveway. The rest of it, I was thrilled to see grass for the first time since I believe it was a week before Christmas.
Well, we're in the home stretch now. We were just talking before we started about Groundhog Day because Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, it's where my husband is from, and that's only about an hour from where Stephen lives right now. And the groundhog did, unfortunately, see his shadow. So we are still in the last remaining weeks of winter here. Hello from Texas. Hi, Gene. And Rochester, New York. There's another cold, chilly place.
Also,
So what did you think? The Worship Summit Live, I was one of the hosts. We had some amazing content, some really, really talented and dedicated worship leaders and volunteers taking us through everything from, just the beginning, if you're just starting out in worship video production and live streaming, to, some of the more maybe complex issues, differences between hardware and software switchers. We covered so much. What did you think, Stephen?
I thought a lot of the folks had some really great presentations, especially somebody that was able to sit back. And it's not normal that I get to sit and watch some of these presentations because I'm usually involved in some way, shape, or form, right? So it was great to be able to sit back and enjoy these presentations and do some takeaways. Gary Buchanan from Boxcast, his presentation stood out to me the most. I think it was very well done. He introduced a lot of comedy. He had some different camera shots. He had the black and white camera shot. He also had, his straight on camera shot. But he was really real in the presentation. I think for me, that was probably my favorite presentation that was done. All of them were, don't get me wrong, were very well produced. It was just like that one, I guess, just kind of stood out to me as he seemed to go above and beyond in his presentation from my standpoint.
I agree. It was a fantastic presentation. And it's safe to say that we learned something from each and every one of the presenters. And, those who were able to attend the Zoom session, we were able to, hear some of those stories and those challenges. And that's what really we're here for. And that was the goal and the objective of both the Worship Summit and with Salt Talk, is to really get out there and answer some of those worship streaming questions that you have, because so many people are just starting this journey or they've been in this journey and things happen along the way, right? Technology changes. Things don't always work right. We test and retest quite a bit, even just to, do this show and to have you produce for me remotely. So we understand that this is not, a foolproof process.
No, and that's why I thought Alan Bunt. I think I'm saying his name correctly. If you're here,
Yes,
Alan,
yeah.
I apologize if I said it wrong. But I think his presentation, Julia, where he took you behind the scenes of a worship broadcast, right? I thought his was spot on when it came to some of the things that you run into, whether I do it a different way or you do it a different way. I thought that was something that was needed there. People need to see what really goes on behind the scenes. As you stated, we do a lot of testing for these shows. Uh, I don't think people realize how much testing goes into some of this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and starting out growing with the technology, you know, you don't necessarily get everything the first time you start streaming for your house of worship, and you know, building that process slowly but surely.
Yeah, I think it's a toss between learning the fundamentals in how you should get started to the gear. And I think Jeffrey Fitzgerald said it best. Everybody always surrounds themselves with the gear, right? It's always about the gear, but there's a lot more to it than just the gear, right? Oh, hang on. I think she got muted here. Hang on a second. I think we can get her straightened out here. All right, sorry about that, Julia. I think you should be good now. I think
Sorry about that. Okay,
there we
you've got
go.
me.
Yeah, we
All right,
got you.
great. So one of the things that is an ever-present challenge is the audio aspect of live streaming. And one of the questions that came up in the breakout room, there were several breakout rooms for those who purchased a Zoom pass and opted for that Zoom experience during the worship summit, and one was centered on audio. Um, Really, really good question. Is it worth bringing in an outside party to help with audio, especially when you're just getting set up?
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't get to go around all the different rooms, but I was in the room with the audio, and so that question did come up, and that was something I strongly recommend. Julia, that's something I say, even if you have a grasp on audio, and I don't consider myself a professional when it comes to audio. I always say I know enough to be dangerous because I'm always learning, okay? But one of the things that I suggest to folks is, try to hire an audio engineer to come in and assess your church, assess your house of worship, because square sanctuaries bounce audio differently than round sanctuaries. I know it sounds kind of funny, but the reality is that these audio engineers are understanding of what needs to be done. And what they'll do is they'll actually go in and do what's called tuning a room. And they'll find out where your high points are, your low points, and where audio or the sound needs to be and where it does not need to be. And so they'll show you where bass trap should be, where you should put some sound dampening panels up, and things like that can optimize your audio. So it is really worth your investment, Julia, to go that direction and hire somebody like that.
Bass trap. So what is that
Okay, so
exactly?
that's a great question. So a bass trap, a lot of times in corners, like if you have a square room, a bass trap, essentially, depending on the company, like I use triangular foam, and I can pull up a picture here in a little bit, that you put in the corner, and what it basically does is keeps the audio or the sound from trapping in the corner, and it'll allow it to reflect off. A lot of low end sound can get trapped in corners, underneath stages, especially when you got a bass guitar, a bass drum. It can act as like an amplification area. But I'll show some pictures on that here in a second. But these are the types, again, those are the types of questions that maybe churches and folks in here probably never even thought of, like, what's a bass trap, right?
Back to middle school science here, right? Sound is waves. They're sound waves. So these are great points. The size and the shape of the sanctuary, as well as ceiling height, right?
Ceiling height definitely will play a role in that as well. Here, I'm going to pull up for you guys to see. This is a bass trap. It goes into the corner. You can see it's set to basically square off a corner, if you will. Here's like some acoustic panels. Now, they are expensive, but you can look on YouTube to make your own. Like I said, I found some different ones like that you can get, different colors. Houses of worship usually like to get these ones that are stone looking. But if you just Google bass trap, you'll find exactly what it does. But you guys get the idea what it is and what it's going to do. A lot of recording studios, Julia, will use these as well.
So, I mean, again, if you have the ability to get an outside audio engineer to come in, assess what you've got going on, that might be a great way to sort of, avoid any problems along the way so that you set up for success from the beginning.
Absolutely. And because here's the thing, okay? People see, and I'm going to pull up these pictures because I think these will be a great way to show something like this. People see studios like this. We'll just take this with the sound panels here. I'm going to click on it. I don't even know what studio it is. I don't even know who, it looks like somebody's home studio. And they go, well, that looks really cool. I have a setup similar to that. So, Julia, I'm going to go out and buy as many panels as this guy has, and I'm going to put it in my studio or in my house of worship or my sound room, and I'm going to duplicate this. And what they don't realize is every room is different. So you can't just go and buy just because somebody has that, the same setup, or this guy's setup where he's got a bunch of bass traps in the corner. You can't do that because every room is different and every church is different. Every house of worship, synagogue, whatever, is different. And so every room sounds different. So what works for your house of worship, Julia, may not work for mine. And what works for mine may not work for you. You can't, all those pieces of foam are designed to divert sound in such a way that it helps that sound engineer tune a room. Like you can't just grab things. Like I know after researching, I have 1-inch foam in mine and I turn it different ways to divert sound at different places, but I didn't want that hollow sound or that big room sound. So I wanted it to sound more like a studio. So I researched and knew what to get. But when you're dealing with live music, that's why the Grand Ole Opry sounds like the Grand Ole Opry, right?
I've been there. Very cool place indeed. So, do you have any like reading recommendations for somebody, a team just starting out? What, a great book to start with for audio, or is this kind of like trial by error?
This is a lot of it's trial by error. There are some great magazines out there that I do subscribe to. And I know we've written articles for them, so I don't want it to sound like, oh, we're just recommending it because we've written articles for them. But Church Production Magazine, honestly, is a great resource. There's a lot of folks in there. Believe it or not, I go into different church production groups on Facebook and learn, because there's guys in here like this gentleman Clifford here in the chat room who they might have different insight, than what I have. And so I can learn and pick different pieces up. Or like he's saying here, he says he agrees with me, even the simplest problem in audio can present the biggest problems in live streaming. I might be on, Julia, on a trail and going, I think this is right. And then you get somebody like Clifford that comes in and agrees with you or says, no, he's right. I know I'm on the right path, and it causes me to research even more. And so when you find other people that are thinking the same way that you are, you kind of put that in the back of your mind and go, okay, I'm not going crazy here. He says always bring in an audio professional, especially if they also know live streaming. And like I said, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've been running audio for 20, 25 years. I am not an expert. I would not market myself as an expert. I'm constantly learning. So
I think you're pretty humble, but Cliff is a true professional. So we certainly appreciate his feedback. So some of the other questions that came through in that particular breakout room, where is the control room? So, people want to know what does that look like? Where should it be? What do you use in that control room?
Yeah, so that was a question that came up. A gentleman, I believe he was from South Africa, and his control room was, I believe he said it was in the back. I could be mistaken. I talked to a lot of people that day. But anyways, and he was having a hard time mixing, so he was asking for suggestions, like, how do I mix? Like, I can't get a good mix with a headphone setup. And I had recommended that you should get a mixer, and I'm going to lean back here so you can kind of see, that you can control with an iPad. here. So you're not going to be able to hear me because I was too far away from the microphone. But I have an iPad set there so I can mute, unmute sounds. And I do this in the church as well, to Julio, to where I can walk around the sanctuary, or our sound guy can walk around the sanctuary with an iPad and control it from wherever, even if your control room's in the back, if it's in the center of the church. Because, I mean, a lot of houses of worship aren't that big. So ideally, you would want your sound set up right down in the middle of the floor and put chairs around it. But I mean, that's not ideal for a lot of houses of worship. So with technology today, the best thing to do is have something like an iPad where you can go out. It doesn't matter if the control room's in the attic. You can go out with an iPad or a tablet, mix your sound, listen to it live, and then go back in knowing that you have mixed it the best that you possibly can.
Yeah, that portability is very key for sure. I know we also had some questions that came in. Do you want to talk about those now, or do you want to wait and get into? We had some questions.
We can get into them if you want to get into it.
We can, if anyone just has burning questions. I know we get some emailed questions, which is great. Folks can email Salt Talk. Wait, what is our email address? Questions at Salt Talk.
Questions at Salt Talk.
Is it questions at salttalk.com?
No, it's salttalk at PTZOptics.com, I believe
it's salttalk at PTZOptics.
We don't have a website yet. We're getting there.
We'll get there.
Yeah. So there's a question in the chat room. We'll get to you, Lester, right after we get to this. We got to do our fancy little envelope here.
Why? Of course we do.
We got to do it. There we go.
So this is a bit of a doozy, but I will read it, and then we'll take a little bit of time to digest. So this is from Tammy with St. Francis Episcopal Church. She said she's running 330X NDI PTZOptics cameras. She has got audio going to camera 1 and camera 2 from a Behringer XR32 via a line-in port on the camera. Typically, she only uses audio from one camera throughout the broadcast. She cannot use the USB audio interface because she's in a different room. I have the camera set up as NDI sources in OBS. This has worked out great for months, but for some reason this week the audio started cutting in and out on both cameras. I tested it in NDI Studio Monitor and it does not happen, so I'm thinking it is an issue between the cameras and OBS. Any suggestions as to how to fix this? Our church service was unwatchable today because of it, and I am a little freaked out. Oh, we don't like to hear that. I can control the Behringer XR18 from another room, but the actual audio is coming through the line on the camera. Any suggestions for an alternative way to get the audio that does not involve going through the camera? Yeah. Oh, boy.
That's a big one. So I would tend to agree. I would tend to agree that I would say that OBS, for some reason, maybe there's an update, maybe it's not handing it off. The other thing you might want to look at with your church's network, it's potentially, or it's potential that maybe there was some kind of overload on the network that day where it was dropping the audio because of, too many people were on the network. I mean, anything's possible. So I would start with that as being the simple thing. But what kind of threw a curve in that was that you said that the Studio Monitor worked fine. So that kind of threw me and said, well, okay, so if Studio Monitor worked, then maybe the issue was with OBS. It wasn't with your network. My question, though, I know I'm questioning off a question. If Studio Monitor is working, why not just use Studio Monitor? What is the reason that you're going into OBS to transmit it over the network? So if you're watching this, send that as a follow-up answer, because I think that'll help kind of pinpoint what possibly suggestions that we can give, because this is a very good question, loaded question. It sounds like you're going two different locations. So, and if you guys in the chat room have any suggestions, please put them in there, because she could also gain from your knowledge as well.
Yeah, but that network overload issue you mentioned, that's something that they could look up ahead of time, right? To ensure you have enough
Exactly. So we
Yeah.
do have some questions before we get to that next one, Julia, in the chat room here for some folks. That
Okay.
Joshua, we are going to answer your question. You don't have to email it. We will get to it. We're going to go through this first. Who do we got first here?
Lester, is it better to run your own sound to your live stream to get better sound?
Lester, I'm kind of unsure of what you're asking. Is it better to run your own sound? Are you asking should you have somebody else run your sound, or are you asking run a separate setup for your live? If you could quantify that, that would be great.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure either.
Joshua has one, it looks like.
I'm on staff at a local church for tech. I'm on a team with 5 other people. We're a small church. How would you recommend we grow our tech team? Oh, it sounds like a good teen youth group project, doesn't it?
You read my mind. That's exactly what I was going to suggest. Teenagers are always looking to get involved, and some of them, they'll sit on their phones the whole service. So what I did was I got them involved. We use, believe it or not, we use Skype as like a walkie-talkie system. So they're on their phones anyway, so they all get into a Skype group. They have their headset in, and they can communicate. Those when we were running cameras. Now that they're up there in the sound booth, we don't necessarily need to do that as much. We might have one teen down just on the floor saying, "Hey, are you having a problem with this? Because we haven't seen you change anything up there." That's a great way to get them involved because they want to be hands-on. They don't want to just sit there the whole time. So we've found at our church that getting the youth involved was better than trying to get adults involved because they want to be hands-on. They want to learn. They just want to dive in, Julie. It's probably the best of both worlds. All right, hang on one second here. Okay, I think we're good.
And I was just telling you a little bit about my son before we started. You know, he's 12 and already has an interest. So, you know, that preteen, teen age, I mean, what they do, right? I mean, they're gaming, they're into the technology, and what a better way to bring in young people into the church community. How do you handle a situation where some instruments are not mic'd for the sanctuary, such as an organ, but does need to be mic'd for the broadcast? Great question.
It is a great question. It kind of dovetails what somebody asked in an email question that they had sent in. I always suggest when you set up your audio mixer, when you're micing an organ, putting a condenser microphone or two on the back sides of the organ. You could set it up, and if you don't want to have it mic'd in the sanctuary, you could set it up on an auxiliary input, which means you then have control over it. You could send it to just the live stream as opposed to sending it to the house as well. So you could bring it in as an auxiliary in. Now, if you do want to put a little bit in the house because you got a big sanctuary, you could bring it in as an input and then use the auxiliary that you're sending to the live stream to adjust. But that's the way I would do it. If somebody else in the chat room has a better suggestion, you're welcome to throw it in there as well. Let me see here. Oh, Joshua was saying we have teenagers and men. Oh, and men. Yeah, so there you go.
That works. Get the ladies involved too. I mean, you know, speaking from being completely honest, you know, we don't always get invited to the table for this kind of stuff. Girls and women, you know, we're just there. Either there's an assumption that we're not interested, or so get the girls involved too, because it's really important. I started my 18-year-old son when he was 6. Alan, we're not surprised. That's awesome.
Well,
that is great.
Well, you said about ladies, that's something as well. I don't want to call it our senior TD. She'd probably get mad if I said that. But she's almost 80 years old. And I taught her in 2 weeks. And she wrote everything down in a notebook. God bless her. And she was telling these young kids how to do it. She went in there. She says, you start this up first. You open this up. And she went right down her list, which doubled as a way to document it if I'm not there or somebody else isn't there that understands. So don't necessarily knock the older generation if you want to ask them, because some of them are just looking for a place to fit in and be in a place where they can be used within the service. A lot of them, it keeps their mind sharp. They're able to get in there, and they're really good at documenting because that's what they're used to. They're not used to the generation of computers and things like that. So to be able to write that down, Julie, and have that as a document, that's gold in my opinion.
Right. It's a process. It's a technical process. So absolutely. I think that's a great point that you mentioned that. And, anyone can learn. Anyone can learn. So there's a question from the audio breakout room that we're kind of diving into. How to get optimal compression on output stream.
So if the person is asking, they were asking before about how to know how to compress audio, and I've stated it like this, and you guys, it's okay to disagree with me. Again, I stand by. I don't like to do a lot of compression to church music because I feel like it takes away the ambience of the room. I don't say anything wrong about putting a little noise gate on if you don't want to hear like people coughing and kids crying on the pastor's microphone. I don't do too much compressing or gating on any of the instruments. I like that full sound inside of the sanctuary. Some of you guys might rather that studio sound, and that's fine. There's no right or wrong way of doing it. To answer that question, what I would say is it's up to you how you want to compress it. Too much compression will make you sound like the Saturday morning radio host, or you get that Barry White sound. You're not looking for that at a house of worship. So, Julia, I'm going to err on you don't need to compress, or if you do, put a little bit of compression on church or houses of worship music and mics.
You want that authenticity.
Yeah, exactly. But maybe somebody in the chat room has a different argument, and I'm open to it. So that's what I'm going to say.
It may come maybe a difference between a regular service and like a play or a pageant or something like that.
Well, okay, so that's the difference, right? If you're doing a play or a pageant, obviously on the microphones you may want to put a little bit of compression or gating, definitely if you're doing that. But as far as the Sunday morning, we'll call it Sunday morning or Saturday Mass or whatever you're doing, I would say leave it. If it's not broke, don't touch it. Like, don't mess with the audio. Just leave it be, as far as that goes.
I created a very detailed manual with lots of pictures so anyone could walk in and run the broadcast. This is someone from St. Francis Episcopal Church. I don't know if that's Tammy, but that is so smart because everybody should do this in any job you have, right?
Right.
Something happens, you get sick, you're out, and if there's nobody else who knows how to do your job, that's a problem. How do you get, here's another question, how can you get a clean sound from the sanctuary for streaming, clean sound as there is audio in each channel, getting sanctuary room sound back into mics? So I guess that's sort of, you touched on a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, you could do hanging choir mics. You could have that inside of the sanctuary. A lot of people do it differently. They'll put like what they call room mics or condenser mics. So that's a way to do it. There's different. Everybody has their own way of doing it. There's a gentleman in there, Jack. He's saying that he's critiquing us. He says that the audio and video are out of sync. I think it's Jack. It's something on Facebook because it's in sync here. So I apologize. I'd refresh your browser and take a look at that and see if, or check the YouTube feed. Sometimes they do weird things with things like that. So got another question here. A lot of questions today, Julia.
We like questions.
Yeah.
Is ProPresenter friendly for a small church with a low budget? You mentioned that lots of tech members use Skype and earbuds to communicate. Is there other ways you recommend? Josh, this is a great question from Joshua.
That is a good question. We went with the site license for ProPresenter, and I know you get like 15 of them for like, I don't know, $400 or $500. It sounds bad, but when you look at the for one license, if you have a youth room or whatever, it's like $300. So my suggestion is, if you're a small church starting out, or house of worship, PowerPoint, Keynote, if you're on a Mac, you could start with that. There's other solutions out there besides ProPresenter. There's what's called Easy Worship, and they also have a solution. So we have a church locally here that uses Easy Worship. They love it. They have no intentions of switching. It has NDI built in like ProPresenter. So you really need to figure out what your budget is and if you can afford it. ProPresenter
is Easy Worship more affordable than ProPresenter?
I think they're close. I haven't looked at their pricing scheme in a while, but I would encourage you to download a trial of each and find out which one works for you and your team. We like ProPresenter. We're Mac based at our church, so originally ProPresenter was developed for the Mac. So that's why I kind of lean towards that, where Easy Worship just started in the last couple iterations. They've been Mac in the last couple of years. So again, you have to decide what's best for your team. ProPresenter we found to be easy, has a lot of plug-in modules and things like that. So there's the low budget way to do it would be like Google, what's it called? Google Slides, is that what it's called, Julia? Where you can Google Slides, which is like PowerPoint, but is Google, but it's free. And then obviously Skype for earbuds. But there's a lot of things that are out there for free if you want to do it low budget.
But again, the operating system that you plan to use is probably the first thing to consider, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the power that you have in your computer. I see James is saying, PowerPoint works great. And listen, I'm not telling you to go to ProPresenter. You got to do what's best for you and your team. But there's options out there, right? There's things that you can do. I'm just kind of looking over the chat here as we're going. Let me throw this up here real quick.
We love these questions.
Oh, yeah, keep them coming.
All right, this one from Ryan. If you are using a laptop with a GPU that seems to have introduced noise to the live stream audio, how do you get rid of it? When using a lesser laptop with same audio setup, that noise is absent. Oh, interesting.
So that is a awesome question. In fact, I was talking with our head of IT, Matt Davis, about this. Okay. One thing that I've found on a lot of laptops and even Mac Minis I've found is that the audio on it has like this weird low-level hum or hiss, and people that have heard this are probably going to agree with this. So what I've done is I've gone out, and I'm going to show, I'm pulling it up here so you guys can actually see it. I have purchased a bunch of these. Let me get rid of that and go to this. These are USB sound cards, and you can see they're like $9, and they have a line input and a line output. Now, this isn't going to make you like massively digital or anything, but what happens is, because it is analog going in digital, there's no noise in these. And so even with some of the newer MacBooks that I have these on all my MacBooks here, even in the studio, Julia, that even if it's brand new, I put it on because these are tried and true, and it keeps the hum, the hiss. I have played with some of them that are like USB sound cards that are just, maybe they have an extension on it or whatever. Some of them have had noise in them even after a couple weeks. This one has been tried and true for me. I even carry spare of these when I go places in case something happens that I can just plug them in. They're $8 on Amazon. So I can post the link really quick as Julia's looking over the next question. If you guys want, it's not an affiliate link, so you guys can just spread it around.
It's a little hack there for that price, for sure.
Yeah.
That's great. So another question that came up is, how can you figure out balance?
Balance in the sanctuary. That I guess that kind of went with the gentleman that was talking about gain structure. And this is where we start getting outside of my pay grade when I say this. No.
We're gonna have to call in the big guns.
This is where you have an engineer come in and that knows sound, and they set your gain structure. And with gain structure, your board shouldn't be all out of whack. You should have plenty of headroom if you need to manually adjust your faders, or if you have to manually adjust your trim knobs or your gain knobs at the top. You don't know how many churches I've gone into where they've had their faders all the way up, and they've had their trimmer gain knobs turned all the way up, and they have no headroom. Headroom is where you have the ability to turn it up or turn it down, corresponding with whatever it is that you're doing on that particular channel. You don't want your gains all the way up, and you don't want your sliders or faders all the way up, because that can introduce noise. So I try to set my board on the trims and the gains between 10 and 2. And I try to keep all my faders at unity. Some boards say 0, some have a U for unity, which is where it essentially should be. And then what I do is make sure that my output is hitting 0 dB. Now, some houses of worship, Julia, they want it at like negative 20 dB. So you're going to have to set it depending on the house of worship. That's what I do. I try to keep my trim knobs between 10 and 2. I know it's not always feasible, especially if you got cloud lifters on microphones. I'm just giving you a starting point. That's what I would do. So we can see about that. I think we got it, right? Or not. So Julia, I think you should. Hopefully you're back now.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah. So let's explain this really quick, because people are probably wondering. We're talking about audio, and then your audio is dropping. So Julia got an upgrade on her microphone, but we think her USB bus is not handling it. So we're going to work on that.
Yeah. So it's so powerful that it's being knocked out.
We're hoping that's what it is. We're going to do some more testing on it, but we wanted to get it, situated here. And I am going to put that USB sound card in the chat room here, but I needed to get Julia back up here. They give you such a long link, and I don't understand like why it's going to be such a long link for it. It's ridiculous. Like, I click on it, and the chat room says it's too long. So here's what I'll do real quick, just so you guys can have it. I'm going to post what it's called. If you just search it in Amazon, you'll find it. I don't know why it's going to do that like that. But that's what it is. I just posted it in the chat room. So you guys can do that. I'll also put it on Facebook over here, Julie. I think that'll help, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So I've got it in there. All right. Looks like we're good there. Do we have any other questions that came up? Sorry, I was off looking at the other side.
We had, if you might have some questions in the chat, but we had a question that came through the email. Again, there was another Salt Talk.
Oh, yes.
There was another question that, there we go. Well, we kind of just talked about this in a roundabout. I work in a church which has a lot of acoustic instruments. For live stream, we have one set of settings for the sanctuary, another for the broadcast, since a pipe organ does not need to be mic'd in the sanctuary. Questions: what are the best mics and positions for mics for a pipe organ? What is the best way to mic a choir? And what is the best way to mic a piano?
Yeah, those are great questions. And I'm just going to be quite honest, at least with the pipe organ. I have never mic'd a pipe organ. So if somebody in the chat room has any suggestions that we can read out, so it's on the recording, please put it in there. I mean, my guess would be I wouldn't want to put it over top, because you're going to get one pipe louder than the other. So there's got to be a spot on the pipe organ that you can put them either in the front or in the back. And I would do 2, obviously, so you get a better stereo balance if you're going to do that. Same way with other organs and things like that. A grand piano, you open the top of the grand piano up and you put the microphone inside. And depending on whether you use 2, I've seen people use 2. I've seen people use 1. If you got a good condenser, you don't really need to go 2, in my opinion, but some other folks might disagree. Same with a stand-up upright piano. You can lift the top open or put it in the back. A lot of them have what looks like a curtain in the back. You can stick the microphones in that way. and
What
get it
kind of
that way.
microphones would you use for that?
So you would look for like a condenser microphone, something that's going to pick up omnidirectionally, not just straight on. Unless somebody's looking for a direct sound, that would be something that you would find. And again, there's so many different types of microphones out there as far as brands go. Audio Technica, you have Shure, you have. I mean, there's the list goes on and on. So, use what you know that works for you. We have a few Audio Technica, but we have a lot of the Shure microphones. So it's really up to you what you want to use.
Just a matter of what works.
Yep.
Great. Do we have any other questions from Salt Talk in the email? I know we had 2 for sure.
No, we didn't have any more in the email. We do have a comment here. I don't know if you want to read that one.
We use Easy Worship right now, but it looks like Pro Presenter does better with like lower, and you can stream directly from Pro Presenter. I don't know if they meant lower thirds.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
You can stream directly from Pro Presenter. So that just eliminates a step, I guess.
I'm assuming so here. Ryan says, okay, I'm thinking he's answering about the pipe organs.
Oh yeah. Omni condenser mics in the sanctuary to capture congregation singing should capture the organ as well.
Yeah, so Ryan, the question that came up was pipe organ. I've never had to mic a pipe organ, so I don't want if somebody else has done that. Again, we don't know everything, so feel free to put that in the chat room so we can read it out. So if somebody else, we can get it on the recording here. Oh, okay, we do have Sir Francis Episcopal Church says.
We have our mics sitting near the pipes. We tried mics in different places, and that just happened to be where it sounded best.
I have a feeling that's how it's going to be, depending on the room. I mean, again, just thinking about sound in general, maneuvering the microphones around to get the optimal sound. I mean, pipe organs are loud any way you look at it. It's one of those things. Like if you have a small sanctuary, Julia, I think your mic position is going to be different than if it was a bigger sanctuary, right? Because the sound's just going to have so many more places to go.
Sure.
And again, guys, I was in the sound breakout room. We had a great discussion. A lot of guys that were really well knowledgeable. So I'd encourage you, when we run another summit like that, come out, get in these Zoom rooms, because a lot of you guys are knowledgeable, and there's a lot of knowledgeable guys in there. We just have a great time talking about this stuff and throwing ideas around to help each other.
What are the most common causes of audio hum? This is from Richard. Our church has a pre-existing audio setup. The hum comes over the speakers as just white noise, but when we live stream record, it generates a hum.
So a lot of that could be because of a ground loop. Ground loops can be caused by old electric in the building. It could be caused by plugging into different outlets in the wall that are different from where your soundboard is. I'm going to pull up here in just a second here. I'm going to cut over to Julia, but there is there's such a thing called a ground loop isolator, which works for your live stream. Now, this may not work for your live sound. A lot of times you can mask a live sound, but for live stream, a ground loop isolator will work in most cases. I won't say every case, but Julia, I will say most cases.
Well, that's one I haven't heard of.
A ground loop isolator, yeah. So
yes.
Again, listen, and I'm going to say the same thing to you guys before I pull this up. I'm going to say the same thing to you that I said in the breakout room. The one gentleman was like, "Hey, I have some noise like this," and I don't remember his name, and I apologize. And this isn't to knock you or anything, but he understood after we were done. He says, "I have this hum and this noise," and he said, "What should I set my compressor and gate to get rid of that noise?" And I said, "All you're basically doing by doing that, you can do that, but what you're doing is you're sweeping it under the rug. You're not taking care of the problem at hand. All you're basically doing, Julia, is you're masking the problem, right? You're not dealing with
addressing
the problem.
it. Right.
No. So you really need to start at square one and start isolating things and seeing if the audio is humming here, and then add another piece of your gear to the string. Is it humming here? It takes a lot of time. It could take days. It could take weeks. Same with these ground loop isolators. If you search them on Amazon, I'm going to pull it up here. There's different types. There's RCA ones. There's 3.5 millimeter, and basically these are isolators. These are Band-Aids. Okay, I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat it. They're Band-Aids. These are something that you put in to get by until you have time, because they're cheap. They're $10, $12. When you get time, you really need to address your audio, because something in your audio is not right, which is why you're getting that noise. Now, if you're in an old building, Julia, where the electric is bad, then you might be stuck with ground loop isolators for a while. But if it's something because you added to the mix, you can fix that. Maybe it's a bad piece of equipment. You never know.
When do you need to know if you need to call an electrician?
Well, so that's where the engineer comes in, right? So these are the types of things that an engineer will be able to point out right away, where I'm not going to be able to, point some of those things out. Like I kind of could tell, but again, I'm guessing a lot of times. I'm like, well, it sounds like it's a ground loop isolator, or a ground loop. It could be dirty electric. It's
dirty electric. Ugh.
Dirty electric, yeah. And dirty electric can ruin your appliances too.
It sounds like a fire hazard too.
I don't want to find out. But Alan has mic'd some pipe organ.
Mic'd pipe organ in two ways. Boundary mic picks up ambient. My organ also has aux out to
front of house.
Oh, okay.
So he must have a newer pipe organ that has an ability to, that's cool. Hey, again, these are options. This is why we're putting them out here. So Tommy, yes, thank you. He says, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And
oh, please, yes.
And let's see here. Tommy also says older churches are really notorious for hum. That's why I was saying. So if your church was built in the 1800s or early 1900s, chances are it could be electrical. I'm just going to say that. I mean, if you talk to anybody in here that has been in ministry doing this, they're going to tell you more than likely it's your electric, and you're going to be stuck with ground loop isolators probably, unless you have the budget to redo your electric.
But you kind of have to take the bad with the good, because those are some of the most incredibly beautiful architectural, houses of worship. So,
and you don't want to tear it up, Julia. I mean, you don't want to destroy that beautiful sanctuary just to fix electric.
Right.
So you can use a Band-Aid for that.
Right. Right. So do we have any other questions coming through the chat, or any questions or answers? Because I think we covered quite a bit. I mean, we do these shows we do PTZOptics now. We have this show the last Tuesday of the month at 11 a.m. Eastern time. Also, we do a weekly live stream, and I say we collectively, meaning PTZOptics, every Wednesday, 2 p.m. And we go into different topics, everything from, video production to NDI to really, what are we talking about this week? I'm trying to think.
This week.
This week is remote call-in
remote options, and that's going to be a good one. I kind of know a little bit of the behind the scenes, so it's going to be a little bit of fun. You guys definitely want to tune in for that. But there was, real quick before we plug the rest of it, this is more of a PTZ control from Nels. He says, why can't you dock the PTZ controls in OBS? It needs to be a separate window. You might want to check with OBS on that one. I don't have an answer for you on that, so I can see what I can come up with. But right now, I don't know. I don't have an answer for you on that.
You're not an OBS guy.
I use OBS for game streaming more so, because it's great. It's a great free option, and I'm putting together a way for gamers to do it free or low budget, but have high quality. So I'm trying to stay with free tools. But TriCaster and vMix, that's what we use at the church. That's what we use here. That's what I use here. So, but yeah, I'm of the hybrid. I like software and I like hardware. So,
well, I'm glad you mentioned it, because that was the topic of Matt Davis's presentation during the Worship Summit. I'm enjoying Salt Talk. Great job. Oh, thanks, Tom. That means a lot to us. So before we do close out today, as I mentioned, we have the weekly live streams on PTZ Optics Wednesdays at 2. We also have a tech town hall. It's the third Friday of the month. I also believe that's at 2:00.
Yes. Yeah.
And then we have Salt Talk, the last Tuesday of the month at 11 a.m. Eastern. So back to that hardware versus software question, because it just comes up so much. It really does. So software solutions for switching your cameras and video production, live streaming, hardware solutions. You have a preference, obviously, but if you want to just wrap it up, sum it up.
Yeah, no, I do. And like for the longest time, I was a very big software guy. I used Wirecast. I used it for many, many years, and then I recently switched about a year ago to using OBS for game stream, but also using vMix to do the displays to the TV. So, little secret for you guys here: this is not a real background; it's a TV that I have set up to make it look like it's my background. But I use OBS or vMix to power that, so I can switch it to basically any background that I want just by clicking on it like that. And do cool stuff like that. So in the church, we also do that. We have overflow rooms. So having that ability inside of vMix to do that. Now, I could do that in the TriCaster. I could, but that also sometimes requires a little bit more hardware to do that. So I like to use hardware with software. I think that's the hybrid, as Matt, I'm going to steal Matt's terminology from his presentation. The hybrid approach, I think, is a way that everybody should look at. Even if you're not using a TriCaster, Blackmagic has their switcher, their A10 Mini. I think it's $300. Use that with vMix. You got a powerful system. There's tons of options out there to take a look at, but I think software's come such a long way that it's okay to mix some hardware with it, Julia, once in a while, and not have to worry about being, burned at the stake because you're using one or the other. They're all tools. And we're gonna get this dialed in here in the next week here for her audio. We just got to get it with the USB to handle it, right? I think. Let's see here. Hang on a second. So I'm forcing Windows right now, so if anybody's wondering, this is a good learning lesson for you guys here. When Windows drops the driver, I'm trying to force it to give us the audio back. Did it give it back to us?
Yeah.
Hey, there we go. We got it back. So I got to trick Windows.
On that note, we're just about wrapping up. But what I wanted to say, it's not an all or nothing proposition when it comes to hardware versus software. You can use a combination thereof, and as you mentioned.
Yeah, and Richard asks, I won't pull up the lower, but he asked, he said, does vMix allow you to record at one quality but stream it out? Yes, it does. Most software switchers today do allow that. Yeah, you couldn't hear Julia. So if you missed that earlier, she got a new mic setup, which is awesome. Sounds great. But the USB, for some reason, keeps dropping. So with her camera and stuff. So we'll get that ironed out for next week. It's a work in progress.
We'll get it ironed out. We've got a month.
So take us home.
All right. Well, that's it. Thank you so much for being with us on this 2/22/22 edition of Salt Talk. This is if you follow numerology, this is supposed to be numbers of angels. So I don't know. I'll take it as a sign. Thanks very much for being with us, Stephen. Great being your co-host as always. And see you guys. Keep emailing us your questions.